All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm sure a couple more people will filter in as we work our way through. But hello and welcome all to this webinar hosted by Scoro. This is a sort of part two demonstration of a webinar that was held on January 31st by two of my colleagues, Sander and Helen, where they sort of talked about what revenue forecasting is, why you forecast revenue, some of the pain points that people have run into in the past and some of the strategies that people use in order to understand their revenue forecasts. So I'm not going to go too in depth on what revenue forecasting is today or why we do it. I'll do a brief sort of recap. But if you do have any interest or questions about sort of the high level of understanding of revenue forecasting, I do recommend you check out that webinar. We will send a link at the end to all participants here who will go over, to watch that webinar again. And hopefully this will be kind of an informative part two to that series. But let's go ahead and I will get started here. Who am I? My name is Bradley Callender. I am one of the solutions engineers here at Scoro. I'm based out of New York City. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term solution engineer or sales engineer, my job is really to work actively with potential new clients and help them understand whether or not Scoro could be a right fit for them holistically. So part of that is evaluating a lot of agency, consultants, professional services firms, problem sets, one of which is often revenue forecasting. So I've built up a pretty good amount of expertise as far as sort of trends I've seen around the industry and where people have pain points and how Scoro can potentially be a fit to potential clients. So let me go ahead and hop into kind of a quick little poll question just to make sure everyone's awake and engaged. I know a lot of you might be coming from Scoro or maybe have never seen Scoro before. So here's just a quick thing and I'll take a look at the end here. All right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end it. It seems to be that I'll share the results for everybody so you guys can all see it. Seems to me that basically a good group of you are basically either working either in Scoro or in spreadsheets. Obviously, for people who don't use Scoro, spreadsheets is probably the most common use case. I'm glad to hear that most of you guys do forecast revenue. Some of the pain points that I often run into people with spreadsheets, and I'll definitely touch on this, is just the delay factor with any sort of changes in project plans, any sort of changes in pipeline, et cetera. Vast majority of the people I've seen running spreadsheet focused sort of revenue forecasts are doing it on a maybe monthly, sometimes weekly, or even a quarterly basis, which means that there's a pretty significant delay in the information that they get. And maybe it's the accuracy, therefore, is sometimes a little bit inaccurate based on changes that have been made. But anyway, let's go ahead and we will hop into sort of our agenda for the day. Thank you guys for participating. Our quick what is Scoro moment. I realize just based on the poll, at least a good chunk of you guys are already using Scoro in some capacity and probably likely know what Scoro is. So I'm not going to go spend too much time there. But for those of you who don't, I'm just going to give you a quick 20-second elevator pitch on us and who we are. The second one is going to be why is a revenue forecast important? This is where I'm going to kind of recap the last demonstration, really quick. And we can kind of take it from there. And then finally, I do want to talk about how Scoro solves this problem, right? And this will be a product-focused demonstration, show you the feature itself, and make sure that you guys all understand the pluses and minuses of it, how it all works, et cetera. And then lastly, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. Please do use the Q&A section. If you guys have any questions, we'll answer those as quickly as we can, as effectively as we can, and we will take it from there. So let's go ahead and get going. So what is Scoro? We're an end-to-end work management software. Often people use the term professional services automation tool. PSA is a term you may have heard. Really, our main function of Scoro, if I was to tie the value into one thing, is we really tie time and money together. For those of you who are on Scoro, you understand the value of this. For those of you who aren't, really, we want to make sure that you have the real-time feedback from where your costs are, where your time entries are, and that project progress and budgetary process that are often living in two separate places. So Scoro really provides a series of features from kind of the top of the funnel pipeline all the way through the actual billing in order for all of these pieces to get tied together. Hence, we use the term end-to-end work management software. So the value is far beyond just revenue forecasting, but for today, that is what we are going to be focusing on, and that is what my demonstration will focus on. But once again, by no means a holistic view of what Scoro can do for you and all of the functions that we have in here. So this one is going to be how PSAs solve forecasting bottlenecks. So, as a quick reminder from the last demonstration or the last webinar, revenue forecasting is really tough because it's hard for us to get a sense well into the future beyond sort of what's actively in front of us. So for those of us who are currently just using kind of active projects as a way to forecast revenue, we're really getting a very limited view of where we need to be. And seeing as Scoro as a PSA tool does tie sort of that time and dollar amount together, it's very easy for us to calculate, for example, what's been earned so far against a target and use that as a way to calculate out into the future. And because we're also using sort of task planning data and sort of projections of resourcing, we can even get more specific as far as when we can estimate that revenue to come in or when that work will get done. So rather than just being sort of in the near future, the next month, whatever, we can look a little bit farther with active projects and then even further with our pipeline feature, right? So we're taking not just where we're at with kind of our projects and how we expect them to progress over the next couple months, but also how our pipeline is coming into effect and where we expect a new business to be even further into the future. So what dollars we can expect or predict in 6 months, in a year, et cetera. And then the step beyond that, this is going to be, impossible for basically anyone without sort of just using, I would just say, analytics of the past history and kind of trend lines, because you might not have any data for a year out. You might not even have begun the pipeline for a year out. That being said, some of you who are working on yearly or multi-year retainers or do have very long form projects as consultants, these projections could be significantly longer, right? 1+ years, it could be 5+ years that you're looking at well into the future. So once again, PSA is the reason why they're so effective, and why Scoro in particular is so effective at sort of solving this problem, is because we do have that time and money tied together, and we do have the ability to project out when those time entries and those planned time windows, we can call them, are going to lead into future revenue. So anyway, without further ado, I realize you guys all probably came here for the demonstration, and I've really just been given a bit of a recap here. I'm going to go ahead and hop into the software itself, and we can go ahead and take it from there. So welcome to Scoro. For those of you who have never been in Scoro, this is an example of the projects list view. This is a very kind of central section in Scoro, is where a lot of people live and where a lot of people's home pages are. Once again, this is not a holistic view, but just to orient you guys, right? This is where we're pulling out sort of high level data on projects, where we're looking at budgets, where we're looking at light burn downs as far as the number of hours we want to work through on a specific project. But to start my kind of revenue focused demonstration, I am going to click into one of these. I'm going to use my little Project Milky Way here that I built for this demonstration. And I'm going to navigate right to the budget tab and then to this revenue tab right here. And this, for those of you who are newer to Scoro, right, is coming the kind of the new UI rework of Scoro. And you're going to be able to see across a project's budget how much we have earned so far through these earned and recognized tabs, and what we are forecasting to earn all the way through the future. And this target number right here, 31,000, is going to be representative of whatever we've quoted out for that individual project. So in a fixed scope project, right, this is going to be exactly what you've earned. In a time and material project, this is going to be more of an estimate that we can update. Or a retainer, this could be an exact number as well, right? So in this particular case, we'll kind of go through these line by line so you kind of understand what these numbers mean. Earned is going to be what you have earned based on the time entries that you have made in Scoro. So this is going to be based on the calculations against individual tasks that you've actually done so far. And it's going to be automatically done based on either role or service-based calculations. And what do I mean by role or service-based calculations? That really just means how you decided to price out your work and how you're deciding to earn revenue. I would say that probably a little over half of our clients do use sort of a role basis, but well, many of you may use that sort of service basis as far as what each hour of work is worth, right? What each person's time is worth in order to understand this earned number. So this 6,000 right here is basically saying the amount of time that we did in the month of December has led to 6,000 in revenue for us earned so far. Now, this recognized number is basically where we can take the sort of raw calculations and update it to make sense for our flow. In a sort of time and material structure, you may want to use the exact number, right? You may not want to make any updates on this sort of recognized position here. It might not make any sense for you to change exactly what you've earned in a particular period of time. But for some of you who are working on kind of a more fixed scope model, it might not make sense to have earned that much of your project progress, right? Maybe you actually are not 19% of the way through your project. Maybe you're only 15% of the way through your project, or maybe you're only 10% of the way through your project. So we do have the ability to override these numbers through this recognize tab. And what this is going to do is basically tell us what we can actually recognize in a past period to flow through to our future projections and what we still have left to earn to get to this 31,000 number well into the future. So as we kind of work our way through, you'll see that these two lines end and we move into this sort of forecasted category. And this is going to be the numbers that we still have yet to earn. And these are going to be automatically calculated based on our tasks and our Gantt chart structures that we use in Scoro. And this is where it gets really, really nifty. If I look back at my tasks or Gantt chart view, I can see what work I still plan to deliver and the timeline for those to be delivered. And I'm using this form structure in order to understand this revenue forecast moving well into the future. So for that person's work, I think the fake guy's name is Kevin. For Kevin's work, we can expect, if he's working exactly in line with how tasks are structured, to earn revenue in these particular capacity for this project moving into the following months, etc. If I was to come back and move some of these around, and this is that real-time feedback loop that we love and see in Scoro all the time, to say that this task is happening a little bit later, this is going to update the timeline and update the forecast on this budget in order to make more sense. We're now earning significantly more revenue in April and far less in March. If we do want to, we can override these numbers here as well, right? We have the ability or capacity to basically say we actually want to hard code in a certain number because we, for whatever reason, this is going to be where we know otherwise we're going to actually earn that revenue there. So that is sort of the project level of view of how revenue is broken down within an individual project. But where this really gets valuable is where we kind of aggregate that into our sort of entire environment and how we can look at the entire space. So if I do look at our revenue report here, and I've opened a different tab, but it's just navigating through this reports button right here, we can actually see this information sort of in aggregate across the entire Scoro environment. So in here, we can see what was earned in January. We can see what we were doing in February, March, April, or we will be doing in February, March, April for active projects. So the way you read it, if I hover over, is the dark blue is going to be projects in hand, right? This is work that we're doing. This is stuff that we can be confident we're going to have delivered because we've already signed an agreement with these people. And the dotted or the striped blue is going to be in the form of quotes. Now, I know just in working with previous clients, not all of you probably use the pipeline feature, right? Many of you might not. In order to get the best value out of this, I would recommend using the pipeline feature, at least for business that is very close to fruition, right? Stuff that's 80, 90% chance likely to close, because this is just going to give you even more information as far as where we can expect our revenue numbers to be well into the future. And we can use a weighting function in order to basically weight these value of these quotes and the value of that future revenue against the probability number that you guys can, set yourself as far as 90%, 80%, 50%, 20%, whatever, in order to make sure that this forecasted number makes sense for your specific use case. Just like other reports in Scoro, we do have the ability to filter this on, for example, different users we may want to look at or different clients for those of you who maybe are working with a couple clients in a lot of different capacities, a lot of different projects. We see that with a lot of our clients as well. And if I scroll down, you do have the ability to actually see the breakdown of these numbers, right? Where does this value come from? Where are we seeing this value, et cetera? So this report becomes a super clean, easy to use, quick way of understanding sort of what that revenue forecast is. And it will be largely automated based on those calculations that we showed you in that sort of project view a second ago. Okay. And the last bit that I did want to show of this particular feature set is going to be the quoting aspect of it. You have seen how quotes kind of come into effect or quotes come into play when I am talking about this revenue report. So I'm going to navigate to a quote here. For those of you who are already revenue forecasting in Scoro, maybe you already know this, but there's now this estimated duration window right here. And what this is basically like a light version of what I showed you on the project, where if I hit the tab, I can decide the length or the width, I guess, or I guess it's length of the amount of time that you expect this dollar amount to be earned. So the 50 grand, we expect to be over 8 months. And then I can even decide how I want that to be split up. I'm going to guess that the vast majority of you are probably just going to leave it evenly distributed in here. You don't need to make changes. But in the case you wanted to, you could also override values here in order to backfill or front fill some of the revenue that you are seeing for these quoted numbers as well. So just to kind of tie this all together, we're basically taking the quotes information as well as the project level information to generate a very clean, easy to see report as far as where your forecast is going to be. For those of you who are coming from spreadsheets, hopefully this is creating a significant automation for you that you do not need to be spending nearly as much time exporting time data in order to get an accurate forecast. For those of you who are already using Scoro, hopefully you learned something new and you can get a little bit more value out of it as we kind of work our way through. Okie doke. So lastly, I guess I'll kind of come back to my presentation real quick here, just to show you what the value of Scoro is. I know I kind of just summarized that a second ago, but really the goal here is basically to take that sort of core value of Scoro as a PSA tool, which is really making sure that any feedback that you get in the tool, because as we all know, projects very rarely happen on a clean, easy timeline, right? Tasks get pushed back, deadlines get pushed back, scopes change, et cetera. We want to make sure that that feeds into a report in real time. So any of those changes that I was making on the project level, I want to make sure it feeds into an overall view that is filterable and organizable, so you can understand sort of future states of your specific revenue needs. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up to a quick Q&A. I know some of you guys have been asking questions in the chat, but I'm happy to answer any right now. So I have one about a quote that is rejected in your pipeline in the past, but revenue report includes the quote in the month when the quote was closed within my pipeline. So you can have it setting so you filter on basically the type of quote that you're looking at, right? So basically the status of it in order for it to be included or not included. In that particular case, I guess I'd have to see the specific need, but quotes should not be basically, it's only active quotes, right, are going to be the ones that would be included in that particular report. They're also going to move completed quotes off because typically those are associated with a project. My revenue report is showing completed projects, which is skewing. So if your revenue report probably should be showing completed projects if it's sort of for a current month. But if you do want to, for example, get rid of different statuses of projects, if I navigate back here, you can see you can talk about the different quote statuses as well as the different project statuses you would like to see. So if you want to get rid of completed, for example, that would remove that from the revenue report. What is a bill based on milestones? If you bill based on milestones based on 1/3 segments, that is getting into, I guess, a bit of a a theoretical conversation as far as how you like to recognize revenue, right? So there's the sort of cash side of things, right, which is when you ultimately piece in like when those invoices come for like one third, one third, one third. And then there's when you can actually expect to recognize that. And if you have a very sort of hard understanding of when you want to recognize or see that dollar value, I would recommend using the sort of recognizable hard coding section in order to basically force that revenue to occur when you want it to occur, right? Rather than just being based on the task entries, which is sort of automated way, I would basically populate the numbers so they kind of make sense based on the milestone dates or milestone forecasts that you'd like to be using. Is there a way to forecast based on the number of projects? Our quotes include a fixed rate, which is why which we reuse for every single project. I'm not sure I fully understand that question. Is there a way to forecast based? So it should be fine to have forecast based on any number of projects, right? If you're using the same fixed rate, that shouldn't be a problem. The one thing I will say is if you're using sort of a flat fee that has no hours estimates, you got to make sure that you distribute the time evenly in order for the automated sort of like forecast revenue period to make sense. But there should be no limitations as far as the number of projects that you're working with. I'm sorry if I misunderstood that question. Um, So if a quote is associated with a project as a completed quote, I guess confirmed quote, so not completed quote, confirmed quote, it won't populate in the revenue report anymore. You'll use the project data at that point in time. So we have a fail safe in place such that quotes and projects don't necessarily have the same, can't both double populate in the environment effectively. So yeah, this is a great question. Is it possible to recognize amount going above the project value? So the automated way won't go above the project value, but you can hard code the forecast to go above the project value and the recognizable number to go above the hard project value. But in its current iteration, the forecast automated forecast is coded basically to automatically meet whatever the budgeted number is on the quote for that particular project. So you can obviously increase the quote and it would increase that forecast. But if you do need to go over because you work on a time and material model or whatever it might be, you can go ahead and update that forecast to make sense for your specific use case, Nicola. Can you show a treat phased invoicing and forecasting revenue? Typically invoice project in 3 project phases. Yeah, I think this is a very similar question to basically the milestone billing. But if you wanted to basically have the forecast be matched with your invoicing schedule, I would make sure that you basically plug in the recognized and or forecasted numbers to make sense with said project phases. Right now, the kind of automated forecasting is going to be based on those time entries. So whenever those sort of phases are meant to be delivered is when you're going to be kind of earning revenue along the way. But if you wanted to basically be meeting sort of very specific windows, that's how you could basically do it in the 3 sort of project phase methodology. I saw someone talked about basically how you can forecast revenue from a project phase. Um, how do you to modify if you need to change throughout project projection? Um, so I would recommend just watching the recording real quick, just because I don't want to go that far back, but it's very easy to do. You basically can adjust the timelines on the Gantt chart and it will automatically update your projections. So if you're using tasks as this way to plan out sort of your timelines for a project, your revenue forecast will take that into account. So it'll be automatically updating as project timelines change. So it'll be a really clean, easy way, and you won't actually need to manually be making any sort of updates to the forecast if you're using that sort of task structure in a Gantt chart in order to see those changes. We have project which are fixed costs in hours and paid in full at the start of the project. How do I against the project being pulled through? I think this question, Katie, has to do with how do you make sure you don't recognize too much revenue? if I'm understanding this correctly, because you have a fixed cost and are paid in full at the start of the project. So the thing that you'd be basically doing is working towards that target number, right, on the budget. The recognized revenue does not necessarily have to be one-to-one associated with invoicing, right? So even if you've invoiced everything, or in paid in full at the very beginning, you can actually start to see the burn down as you kind of work your way through. Another thing that you can actually do to do this is the WIP report in Scoro does something very similar as well, as far as understanding what you've actually earned against a total invoice number, depending on the way that you guys decide to recognize that revenue via the WIP as well, which is another useful feature that has been around for a little longer, so I didn't cover it today, but definitely great for kind of understanding your project progress. Will you be able to ability to align the forecast to a specific accounting object? I'm not sure about whether or not you'll be ability to align the forecast to a specific accounting object. It looks like Sanders going to answer that, so I'll let him go take that in. Maybe in a future iteration, not as of yet. Um, yeah, so if you do need to manually modify, for example, on phases, and I can show you this real quick again, let me not navigate back because there are a couple questions about this kind of manually modifying of a forecast. If I come back into my project Milky Way real quick, this revenue tab, the only one that is you can't change is this earn because that's based on time entries. But for example, if I did want to sort of overload saying I'm actually going to forecast 7,000 for a particular period, it is going to go ahead and basically front load that number and take away from the future in order to still hit that specific target number in the band effectively. So if you do want to have these phases make sense, you can overload either the past in the recognized, the future in the forecasted. The only one that you can't actually change is the earned. And in this case, the recognized will supersede the earned number. The reason why we still have this earned tab is we want to show you what the dollar value of that recognized number is in case you need to compare that to what you actually want to recognize in a period of time based on project completion or any other reason why you might want to recognize a different amount in a different period of time. Let me go back to my Q&A slide here real quick. Is there any way which we can add invoice work to sit in earned? So invoiced work only sits in earned if it's an external cost. This is kind of an advanced piece, but invoiced work can be included in the earned section if you are invoicing for, so let's say, freelancers that you use or something like that. Those will pass through into that sort of earned column as soon as basically you invoice it because they are external costs that you're basically passing through that you want to compare against the forecast. There is a setting in Scoro that basically allows for you to include the entirety of that sort of external cost in the revenue forecast rather than just the margin of it, depending on the way that you'd like to compare it to. This is going to be more or less relevant for those of you who actually do have very significant external costs, which some of our clients do, some don't. So I didn't go too in depth on that today, but that is a setting, and there's definitely a big help article which can go more in depth as far as the reasons why to have those on and off. Will you be able to include forecast disbursements? A lot of our time also includes free. Yeah. Okay. I think that's kind of basically what I just talked about as far as how to deal with freelancers and partners. I also see that Sander is typing an answer there, so I'll let him finish that question. Can we see the product development roadmap with timelines? Unfortunately, you cannot. We are trying to be very transparent as far as what our timelines are, but obviously roadmaps are changing. If you have a specific question about a very specific feature, definitely do reach out to our sales team or our services team, and we're more than happy to discuss kind of where the priorities are, what's on the timeline, but we can't share kind of a comprehensive roadmap and timeline as those things are changing all the time. And for those of you who work in software, as you know, we need to make adjustments regularly, effectively, to such a thing. Okay. You guys really hit me with the questions today. Definitely went through these. I really appreciate you guys' engagement. I hope you guys found some value out of this, kind of on your Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday morning, depending on where you are in the world. And I do really want to say thank you guys. If you are already a Scoro customer and you are using revenue forecasting, hope you learned something. If you're not yet a customer of Scoro and you feel like maybe we can add some value, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to speak with you. But even if you decide not to, really hope you got some value out of this. And I hope everyone has a lovely rest of their day. And yeah, bye all.